one of those things. There can be the financial risk, there can be the mental risk, there can be emotional risk, there can be physical risk. But if we don't risk, then what happens, and this is my own humble opinion, is we flatline really early.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm seeing more and more people flatlining or being, slave to their circumstance. But even in all circumstances, we all have choice.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Welcome, freedom fighters. How courageous and brave are you? Do you tread boldly where no one has been before? Or do your fears of all of the what if and maybe risks hold you back and numb you into inaction? Or worse still, do you jump in boots and all, and as soon as it gets tough or you encounter the inevitable problems, do you bail, take a hit, and then never do it again? Well, in my humble opinion, if you're not challenging and stretching yourself every day, then you're not learning. And if you're not learning, then you're not growing. And if you're not growing, then you're not actually living. You're actually dying on the vine. You're going backwards without even knowing it. You see, we have it so good and so comfortable in this country that we seem to have forgotten how to take calculated risks that will take our life from good to great. I believe we need to step outside of our comfort zone. And as Tony Anagor puts it, leaving your comfort zone is like leaving your house on a freezing cold day. You might as well take 20 steps rather than just one. You're going to be freezing regardless of how far you go. Now, to illustrate this better, let me share with you a great story called Entering the Law that Dr. Franz Kafka told over a century ago that I've unashamedly borrowed from one of my respected mentors, Neil Connor. Now, the law is a metaphor for the promised land, that land of milk and honey where you finally have the time to do all the things that matter and escape from the drudgery, the conformity, and the entrapment of the never-ending treadmill. Now, in the story, a man travels many days and many nights through the harsh, barren desert because he wants to enter the law. Now he finally reaches the castle wall that protects the promised land of the law and the gate that allows you to enter. And at the castle gate that he's travelled so far and so hard to get to, there's a gatekeeper. And the man says to the gatekeeper, "I've sacrificed everything to get here, so will you give me permission to enter the law? Can I enter the gate?" And the gatekeeper says, "No, I can't give you permission." The man explains how hard he's worked and how much he wants to enter. But the gatekeeper shakes his head and he says, "No, I can't give you permission." The man gives gifts and trades with the gatekeeper. He makes promises to the gatekeeper. And each day he asks, "Can I have your permission to go through the gate?" And the gatekeeper steadfastly says, "No, I cannot give you permission." Since the gates are open, the man tries to peer through the archway and along the colonnade of archers and other gatekeepers to catch a glimpse of the oasis at its centre. Now, seeing this, the gatekeeper laughs and he says, "If you're so drawn to it, just try to go in. But beware, I'm powerful, and I'm the least of the gatekeepers. From archway gate to archway gate, there is one gatekeeper after another, each more powerful than the last. The third gatekeeper is already so terrible that even I can't bear to look at him. Now, these are obstacles the man from the country was not expecting, and he's suddenly struck by fear. The law, he thinks, should surely be accessible at all times and to everyone. But now that he's fearful of what lies beyond, he decides that it's better to wait until he gets permission to enter. So day after day, he asks, he pleads, and he begs the gatekeeper to give him permission to enter the law. But the gatekeeper steadfastly shakes his head and says, "No, I cannot give you permission." Now the man, who's carried all of his worldly possessions for his journey, sacrifices all he has, however valuable, to try and convince him. This goes on for years and years, and over time the man fixes all his attention on the gatekeeper and forgets about the other gatekeepers, as this first one seems to be the sole obstacle preventing him from entering the law. He curses his bad luck and he blames the gatekeeper and everyone else for his misfortune. Finally, the man is nearing death and he's in his last days, but he's still at the gate. And on his final day, his voice weak, the gatekeeper leans in and the man says, "Gatekeeper, I only have hours left. Will you give me permission to step through the gate to get a proper glimpse of what I've missed beyond?" And the gatekeeper says, "Man, you're stubborn, but no, I can't give you permission." And then the gatekeeper closes by whispering in his ear, "And it's such a pity, because when you die, I'll have to close this gate, because this gate was made just for you." The moral of the story? If you're waiting for permission, it will never come. So how do you know when's the right time to push through? When's the perfect time to invest your time, your energy, your money in something rather than just stick with the job and the life that gives you safety and security and puts just enough money in your pocket to survive? Your current comfortable good is the enemy of your future great. If you're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect circumstance, or the perfect situation before you take the leap of faith to invest in something that's important to you, it will never be and it will never come. No one and nothing can give you that perfect moment or sign. There's never the perfect time, and time's the only resource that we don't get any more of, and time spent investing in something will be the biggest contributor to your success. Now, the world is full of gatekeepers and permission granters, some real and some in our head. But if you're waiting for them or someone else or something else to give you permission, you will never enter the gate, you will never solve the part of life's puzzle that you are here to solve, and your life will be filled with a dark and depressing dread of regret. You just need to do your homework and take calculated risks, and rekindle the courage and bravery that this great country was founded on, knowing that a healthy feeling of fear is actually an indicator that you're stepping out of your comfort zone, and by challenging yourself, you're learning and growing and moving forward. So I challenge you to get out of your comfort zone and go through those gates, take those risks, and learn that in life, no one can give you permission, only yourself. If there's one thing I implore you to do, it's not to live a life littered with regret, those what-ifs and if-onlys. So do your homework and have the courage to take calculated risks. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? As my father-in-law, George Nagy, always used to say when presented with challenges, "Did someone die? No? Oh, well, it's not a problem then." So if you're waiting for permission, then this is it. You have just given yourself permission. If you're waiting for a sign, then this is it. Get invested. And as I quote in my book, The Freedom Formula, on the other side of your fear lies your freedom. Now, I know what you're probably experiencing, a lot of fear and anxiety right now. Your pulse might have picked up, your breathing might have quickened, or you might have that uncomfortable lump in your throat or that tightness in your chest. Now, despite how you feel, this is actually a good sign, not a bad one. But how do you overcome these feelings of fear and anxiety that plague us? Those silent, incessant voices in your head so that you can exhibit the courage and the bravery to push through your self-imposed limitations. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you'll know that I firmly believe that sustainable success lies at the intersection of yourself, your health, and then your wealth. And if you don't master yourself, then you can forget about the other two ealths. And this is where today's guest comes in. Lisa Bondarenko is an acclaimed counsellor, author, speaker, and just an awesome human. Early on, she spent many years enjoying a very successful corporate career in human resources, marketing, and event management. But like all of us, we have moments in life which force us to take a step outside of safety and to jump into something new. So, as a maturing student, she walked away from her successful career to immerse herself at uni for 4 years in all things social science and counselling. There she was able to solidify her lifetime love of what she calls human wiring and behaviour, with knowledge and understanding that's equipped her with a really strong and deep framework. A framework that assists her to help individuals, groups and organisations in health and wellbeing from a very holistic mental, emotional and physical perspective. Lisa now drives her successful business, Eshe Counselling, where she specialises in infertility, grief and loss, self-esteem, and marriage and relationship counselling. In early 2014, she launched Adelaide's first ever health retreat, Mind, Heart, Body, working with some of Adelaide's leading experts in health and wellbeing. Lisa helps you to live consciously and proactively, as well as develop increased self-awareness, insight and skills to not only survive, but thrive in today's challenging world. She's also written a fantastic book called Silent Tears, her personal account of the highs, lows, and everything in between that's experienced by a growing number of families facing IVF and fertility crises. It's a story that has you laughing and crying at the same time. It's a real-life roadmap for surviving, overcoming, and finding hope amongst pain and despair. Now, I've known, liked and respected Lisa and her husband Serge, both personally and professionally, for over 20 years now. And she's a proud wife, a mama bear as she calls herself. She's a blogger, an author, a public speaker. She's a budding musician with an awesome singing voice. And she's also a lover of fresh flowers and a very talented power shopper. Now, Lisa always tells it how it is, with humble and side-splitting humour. So if you're looking for that catalyst for your courage, then you're really going to enjoy this great conversation with Lisa Bondarenko. Welcome, Freedom Fighters. Today, guys, we get to have a really fun conversation with someone that I've known, liked and respected for nearly 20 years now. And over this time, we've both evolved in many new and varying directions. But I think the common thread that maintains our mutual respect for each other is a real down-to-earth commitment to caring for the health and welfare of others. And I will say, along with the fact that she's an absolute crack-up who regularly has me in absolute stitches of laughter. So let's get invested, Lisa Bondarenko. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bushy Martin. Nice to speak to you.
We've been very formal today, which is very unlike us.
I know.
Hey, for those who don't know you, I know you're well known in the sphere in good old Adelaide town, but for those who don't, that are listening from afar, can you start by just giving us a bit of a rundown on who you are, what you do, and where you're currently heading, Lisa?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I am an Adelaide girl. I'm proud of it. I have been practicing in private practice in counselling for 9 years now. Look, my background actually was from a HR perspective. I got out of that and went back to uni at 30. And I have the privilege of working with so many different people and scenarios. And I think if I had $1 for every time someone, said how depressing is your job, I probably wouldn't have to work. But it's not depressing at all. I absolutely love it. I get inspired daily, and I've had the opportunity of working with a lot of corporate environments, government, communities, not-for-profits, talking about, mental health in the workplace. I've run health retreats. I love running training and workshops. My passion, aside from one-on-one counselling, is really about educating people, because education, I think, is, key to success. And where do we learn about grief, or where do we learn about mental health other than on the job, like when we're going through it? So I'm forever going to be blowing the trumpet, I guess, about normalising therapy, counselling, development, whatever we want to call it, because there's not a human being that walks this planet that doesn't need someone alongside of them just to help process life.
Hallelujah. Absolutely 100% agree with that. And I'm really going to dig into some of that, actually, because of there's still, surprisingly for me, quite often a perception that you have to go and see a counsellor, there must be something wrong with you. And I'm really keen to dig into that subject, because I know firsthand, having spent a lot of time over the years with counsellors, psychiatrists and whatnot of varying degrees, have made a massive difference to how I approach the world. And I don't see that as a failing at all. I just see as exposing myself to people who can see me better than I can see myself, and giving me usable techniques to better cope and better tackle the challenges that the world throws at us. So very keen to delve into that later. But what I guess what I'm keen to do initially, Lise, is to get you to take us back through and go back as far as you would like to talk about your journey so far, and sort of dig into what you did and why you did it at the time. Where did that get you to? What did you learn from it, and how did that bring you to where you're at now? Do you mind just
yeah, sure, as
early as you like?
Okay, well, look, I'll give you the shortened version, but my background. That's how you and I met, John. I was in HR, I was in recruitment. I was very ambitious, loved what I did, and was quite career focused, to be honest. But when I left school, I'd always wanted to study psychology, and just was actually having too much fun. Didn't want to, commit myself to too much, and wanted to travel the world, and I kept putting it off. And I was probably I wouldn't say the peak of my career, but I'd certainly climbed the ladder, and I was really proud of where I was at and loving it. And I felt like it was a good space for me. And I got married to my now current husband, and we had started to, we decided we wanted to start a family, and things didn't go to plan. And we were, I guess, started on the journey of what ended up being 8 years of infertility and a lot of, I guess, trauma and challenges. And while I was in that space, I guess this whole scenario of therapy, we were not forced into therapy, but we had some support. And I realized that actually it was just an element that I was still really passionate about standing alongside people. And in the midst of our journey, I actually threw in the towel in my corporate world and went back to uni, which was a really big deal, because for so many reasons in my life, I felt like I was failing at trying to become a mum and all of that. And then I felt like from the outside, people were like, why is she quitting, a great career to go back and earn no money and be a uni student? But I laugh. I think it was kind of free therapy every day for about 3 or 4 years, which you can't put a price on. Yeah, I know. It was like kill two birds with one stone, and I think so that kind of took me on a different journey, and I finished uni and I smashed that out, and I knew, I still laugh because I knew what I didn't want to do. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So there were a lot of things on my list from, a perspective of what did I want to do with a career in this industry. And I tell you what, the list was very long of what I didn't want to do. And I was driving down Brighton Road. I'd graduated. I was like, what am I going to, I really wanted to do private practice. Everyone was like, don't be ridiculous. You've got no experience. Why would you do that? It's a risk. Driving down Brighton Road, and I saw this sign of an office for lease. Went in, chatted to the landlord, and I came home and I said to Serge, my husband, I was like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I just feel like I just need to take a leap of faith and sign this lease. I will work 2 other jobs to continue to bring some money in and also pay for the lease, but will you back me? And he was 100%. You got to do it, babe. Now, you can imagine people were like, what is actually wrong with you? Why would you sign a lease for 12 months? That's crazy. You don't even. But I just knew, because I knew that I need my definition of success and failure had changed. My definition of failure was not trying and failing, right? So I sat in that office. This is no word of a lie. I sat in that office. I'd get up every morning, get dressed, and I'd go sit in an empty office for about 2 months. My phone did not ring. I had nothing, and there were some challenging times because your self-doubt kicks in. And then I've got my first phone call, right? This person rings me and says, "Hi, Lisa, I've been given your," and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? And I was like, of course, do you have any available appointments? And you'd play the old, I'll just check my diary. And it's like, well, of course, I have no one else here. So, and then she said, but here's the thing. The truth is I can't afford much. I only got $20. And I did not even blink. I was like, no problems, come on in, because I was just like, this is the start. And so I started a journey of backing myself and in all honesty, working 2 other jobs because I needed to still earn an income and all that kind of stuff. And the rest is semi-history. It's been 9 years, and you know what it's like in business. You have your highs and lows, and there's been plenty of time that I've gone, you know what? I would much rather just work at Witchery. Way easier, get good clothes, I'll be sorted. So I'd sit with the accountant and he'd be like, not a good year, Lise. But I think it was that whole belief system or value system of, Lisa, what is success and what is failure? And through my own personal journey, that definition really changed. And I do a lot of work with people now on that, because I think that for so many of us, we are walking a line of a version that we've been taught, but it is not true to ourselves.
And just restate it, because you said it very, very well and very quickly, but I think it's a really important point there. Can you just
that my definition of failure was not trying and failing. It was actually not trying.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that sense of, what will people say if I shut up shop after 6 months? Well, actually, I back myself and go, at least I tried.
Yeah.
At least I tried. So whereas before, probably my definition would be, failure would have been trying and not succeeding. But I don't believe that, and I didn't believe that, and I've done a lot of work around that. So, and I think that many people probably are living in that scenario, and I'm not suggesting that my version is 100% the only way, but for me, I had to keep in check that to take a risk was success. To take a financial risk, to take a personal risk, an ego risk, everyone like eye rolling at me going, who do you even think you are starting up a practice, Lisa? Like you're a nobody. And I was cool with that. I was really okay with that. That doesn't mean there weren't tears. That does not mean that there were days where I thought, what am I actually doing? But I think it was that backing myself of, I've just got to try. And if I fail, you know what? Head high. And honestly, there've been years with the accountant that I think he's probably been eye rolling at me, to be honest. But I held my head high with my little pink manila folder as I sat across the table from him going, I'm just running my own race.
Yeah.
Just running my own race.
And here's the thing, there's a bunch of things I've always respected about yourself and Serge. But there's 2 really important things I think I'd love to underline with what you're saying there for those that are listening. And that is that you've believed in yourself, but Serge has believed in you. And because you've approaching that goal as a partnership, because I'm saying this because Sonia and I are no different. We've backed each other, and the way we've bridged the chasm, the financial chasm, because the one thing that I have taken away from all my research over the last 30-odd years on success is that financially, the first few years, and can be up to 10 years, can be really lean. But if you're getting on stage often enough, and just as you are, taking the $20, but every time you're sitting in someone, you're getting better and better at what you do, Then it
Correct.
gets to a stage where you get really good at it, and the word of mouth exercise looks after itself, and then the financial side starts to look after itself as well. But you've got to get through the desert, and getting through the desert with a supportive partner is a lot easier than someone who said, well, you have a crack at that, Lisa, but if it doesn't work out in 2 years, you're back in a job. And I see that, and I also see a lot of people, exactly as you say, around that definition of failure and success. We almost live in Australia, we've got it so good that they almost become golden handcuffs, and that people are then too fearful to have a crack. And they might be really unhappy in their jobs, and they might hate their bosses and hate what they're doing and hate the travelling to work every day, but that seems safer and less risky than having a go. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think there's definitely that social construct about what actually is success and what is failure. And I think, we're in a world where the likes of social media, look, there's some good aspects of all of that stuff, but ultimately I think it's breeding this one-trick pony of what success looks like. And I think that is absolutely like a catastrophe, because what my version is and what yours is and what my neighbour's is should be different, because we're not like carbon cutouts. So I feel like we're living in a world where everyone is trying to achieve the same things, and I think why? What works, and like going back to Serge and my relationship, we are, I guess each other's wingman, and there's been plenty of times I've backed him, and I'll probably talk to you about that, what we're doing right now. But I think it's also a trust thing. I think it's risk, and risk is one of those things. There can be the financial risk, there can be the mental risk, there can be emotional risk, there can be physical risk. But if we don't risk, then what happens, and this is my own humble opinion, is we flatline really early. And I'm seeing more and more people flatlining or being, slave to their circumstance. But even in all circumstances, like, we all have choice, and some of the choices are, even on the platter are not great, but we still get to choose and we still get to move. Yeah. But many, many people, and, I've been in that position where we're paralyzed and we feel like we can't and we shouldn't and we won't and we don't. But I guess that's a belief, a core value and a belief system. And, there's some personalities, John, you would know this, that just take risks. That's who they are. Yeah. But I don't think it's an all or nothing. Oh, well, it's just not my personality. I think it's a choice. I think choice and being able to choose and really, I guess, backing yourself or taking risk and taking chance. I think it's about courage and bravery. And people, and I think that it's a really undervalued, not skill set, but undervalued character trait or choice. Because I think if we were all being more courageous and brave, imagine what the world would look like. Well,
here's the thing, again, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. I've been doing a lot of reading and listening and whatnot around this subject, but the days of the long-term job are long gone.
Gone ski.
So the people who stick in those corporate jobs thinking that is the least risk option, I believe, are kidding themselves, because unless you are irreplaceable, and not many people are, we might think we are, but very few are, then the biggest risk of sticking with that model, of the perceived safe model, is that it may well fall off the cliff. And you talk about flatlining. I think it's a bit worse than flatlining. I think it's actually going backwards. It's only incremental, but if you're not challenging yourself, if you're not having the courage to pursue the things that you really want to, then you're without realising it, you're putting yourself potentially in quite a dangerous position. But talking about the courage and the bravery, and they are key aspects of what you're talking about. How can you assist someone to have that courage and bravery to perhaps back themselves as you and Serge have? Any thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think, courage and bravery is not, just one fits all. And what might be my courage might be someone else's version is different. I think courage and bravery is very personalised. I think, I see it in the counselling room. Some people come in and they are like just so beyond courageous. It makes me, wince of like, wow, Lisa, you really need to take stock, right? Because, but it's not about comparing. I think it's about the first port of call for me is, kind of getting real and honest and kind of raw with, my why and my what, like why am I doing, like, let's go back to the Monday to Friday job, and there's nothing wrong with that. And some people, that is their absolute delight, and stick it out and go for it and be amazing. But that's a different story for people that are just doing it because. And there's always reasons why we can't do things. But even in that, sometimes just a conversation can be courageous around, this is not what I want.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it, but I'm just going to have the conversation. And because, it's like people come into counselling and it's not, in a 1 hour session, we are not radically changing people's lives. We are doing footprint. And I always talk about what's your footprint when you walk out of this door? What's one footprint that is going to be different to when you walked in? And I think sometimes the footprint is just acknowledging and going, you know what, this needs to be addressed, and that's courageous. That is, like, I would high five someone and go, well done for even sitting in that.
Yeah.
But I think most of us do not give ourselves the time or attention to even have that internal conversation.
And hence, yeah, absolutely. And we blame busyness, we blame no time, but they're quite often things to hide behind.
Well, it absolutely is, because actually, have you ever felt in your own world, John, if I open that door, I don't want to go there because it's not going to be pretty, or I'm going to have to address things, or I'm going to have to make changes, or I'm going to have to, have that conversation. So we go, we'll just keep that little door closed. And that's okay. We can do that. But remember that when we choose to do that, we're saying yes to something and no to something. So what are we saying yes to and what are we saying no to?
And how is not tackling that serving me in the
Yeah, correct. And there's time and place. There's times where it's like, actually, and I'll say to people, keep the door closed. Do not open that. You are not in a space to deal with the open door. And that's okay.
That's I hadn't thought about that, but because it is a Pandora's box. Once it's out of the bag, then it can go in all sorts of directions.
And people need to be equipped. The last thing we want is for people to be opening doors of history or childhood or experience or whatever, and not have the framework of support and understanding and backing. Like that's just not good due diligence. Like, I'll never unpack something with anyone that there's not a framework to support that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's I hadn't actually contemplated that, but there's a right time to tackle those if you're going to survive through it, which is really good advice. Awesome. Hey, one of the things that I would like to talk with you about, given I'm sure you probably tackle this every day, is the subject of anxiety, Lise, because it's a thing I'm hearing a lot about. And I'll be interested in your thoughts on what anxiety is, but I reckon that there are times when I definitely suffer from anxiety without ever recognising that that's exactly what it is. And it seems to be something that is a growing exercise across the board, whether it be visible or invisible. Can I get you to sort of expand on what you see around that, and what some of the symptoms of anxiety might be, and then what some of the strategies might be to assist people who might be suffering anxiety in all of its forms?
Yeah, well, look, obviously I do talk a lot and work a lot around anxiety, and the first thing I want to say is that anxiety is a normal human experience, right? It's a normal human emotion. And I think what's happened, this is my own humble opinion, is that it's become quite the pop word, pop culture, and we've got kids using the language, and there's nothing wrong with the label. But I think it's about normalizing anxiety. Now, there's two versions of anxiety. Anxiety of the common human experiences when we're stressed about a situation, we're nervous, we're anxious, we're about to get up and speak in front of someone, we've got that deadline, that normal.
The healthy
there's
anxiety.
A reason, right? There's a reason that I'm anxious, and that, is not something to be feared. It's just, well, why wouldn't you be? You're getting up in front of an audience. Of course you've got butterflies and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The other version of anxiety is when it's crippling and when it's, in the driver's seat of our life, and when it's changing our ability to make choices and do things and be and all of that. And that's the version where I say you need medical intervention, that, you need to get a hand on that, because, that there's a difference between anxiety and an anxiety disorder, right? Okay. So I want to talk more about anxiety though, right? And as I said, anxiety is, normal, but, I think what's happened is that we have become a bit fearful of it, and it's become now a mental health label rather than, no, that's just being human, right?
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't become a mental health label until it's diagnosed, until it's actually, become bigger and more than just your average daily experience or event experience.
Because it's something that I start to see in people is that once they can hang on to a label, that becomes the excuse for all sorts of things that they're not doing, and therefore I don't need to do that because I'm suffering from anxiety. Would I be reading that right or not?
Yeah, look, I think, any label, and I have people that come in and sit down and they'll say, hi, my name's Roger and I've got anxiety, and I'm like, well, that's helpful information, but I'm just more interested in Roger, and talk to me about the anxiety. It doesn't become a part of who we are. So I think that, yes, it definitely holds people to ransom, and also acts as a bit of a scapegoat. But I think it's also about recognizing that anxiety is about fear. Anxiety is about, the unknown. Anxiety is generally caused around, the overthinking, the worrying, the excessive concern. And so when we have those expressions, or when we have the physical, the heart racing, the sweaty palms, the, feel sick or whatever, I think it's about just stopping and acknowledging it. But what's happening is no one wants to stop and acknowledge it. We just keep going, and then it just builds and builds and builds. But it's like when people come into me, like I think about the common concept of crying, the amount of people that come and sit down on my couch, and before I've even done an intro, they're crying. And I'll say, what's going on for you? Oh, nothing. I don't know. And I'm like, but we don't cry for no reason, right? Yeah. So there's always a why happening around the what. So with anxiety, it's like we're not having a physiological reaction to nothing. There's a why. So let's talk about that. And let's address that, and let's take control of that, because anxiety can snowball really, really quickly. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm going to be late for Bushy's podcast. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? He's going to be angry with me. And then we're going to not be, and it snowballs.
The stories in our head. Yep.
Yeah. It's the stories in our head. But also being able to go, I just feel really anxious, because it's different when, and I think anxiety is seen as the bad emotion. Anxiety is seen as the bad experience. Anxiety is seen as, the dark side. But why is it different to joy? It's just that it has a different expression. It's
interesting you say that, because I use anxiety in my own case as a measuring stick for whether I'm challenging myself. Okay. And because I like I guess my belief's pretty similar to you, that if I'm not learning something new every day, then I believe education and learning is what life is ultimately all about. And I guess the story in my head is if I'm not challenging myself, then I'm not growing. And the measuring stick for whether I'm growing is whether I feel a bit anxious, because it means I'm outside of my comfort zone, and it means I'm stretching myself, and it means I'm probably doing something that I haven't done before. So yeah, that's really interesting. I guess again it comes back to how we respond in our head to these situations that occur to us, and then what story we put around that.
Well, I think also, anxiety can be frightening. Some of the physical reactions to anxiety, panic attacks, things like that. That's not fun. And it can feel very out of control. And I think it's more about embracing and going, okay, what is this telling me? Just like the tears are telling me something's not right. What's anxiety? What's happening and I think it's about that honest conversation with ourselves of, if it's just, I've just got to get to this deadline and I'm really anxious, and once that deadline's over, I'm going to be fine. Well, that's different, right? But if it's ongoing, and if it's this constant battle of the mind, and it's changing our ability to just do normal tasks, or, we might not go to that party because, we're a bit, well then I say, let's address that. Let's work with that. Let's just look at it at least, and there's plenty of people who are living with really high levels of anxiety who are living amazing lives. It just means that they've got habits, structure, discipline, understanding, awareness around what works for them.
Can we talk about some of those coping strategies? Because it is something that I see increasingly, and people deal with it or don't deal with it in lots of different ways. Are there some approaches that we can take that might help with all of that? You're happy to share?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's not a one straight off the shelf, and everyone has the same thing because everyone's so unique, right? But I think it's really important that as human beings, if we are experiencing anxiety or anxious thoughts or anxious experiences, that we need to acknowledge it, and we need to just start sitting in that and working out why. Not ignoring it, because that's what's happening. People are ignoring it, and then it snowballs and gets worse, right? So I think it's about the acknowledging. I think it's about having conversations. I'm always talking and not trying to normalize anxiety. I'm not trying to normalize anxiety disorders and living at that level, but I'm trying to normalize anxiety as it's okay. Like, if you're not experiencing some version of anxiety at some point in your life, then, are you a robot? Because it's just part of life. Yeah. But it's just more about, what have you got in place? Do you understand it? What are some of what are your telltale signs? For me, it might be I just feel a bit nauseous. I've got that feeling, so that I can name it. So I go, hang on, that's not just I ate something wrong last night. That's that anxiety feeling, and we can actually start dissecting it and recognizing it in our own body, recognizing it in our behavior. So if I start doing the whole, I'm just not going to go to that family event and we make up excuses, and then the next week I'm doing the same, it's like, why is my behavior changing? So it's the awareness and knowing your own body, your own patterns. So I think that's really key, because once we can know that, then it's like, I can feel it. I know I'm in that zone. I need to address things. Then, I think it also comes down to, and again, this is not a one size fits all, but I think, there's some things just from a practical place of habits and disciplines around, how do I stop that excessive worry? Because we need to, I guess, press pause on that or address the issue. Because often anxiety is based on things that haven't happened, but they just might. So we're going to sit in that space and panic about it.
That fear of the unknown that turns into an ugly story. Yeah.
Yeah, and so being able to stop, and there's so much research done on the brain and how we need to, rewire that and actually be accountable for it. No, I will not allow myself. I won't get lazy in my mind to just allow a snowball effect of, I had a bad experience that's turned into I've had a bad life very quickly. So it's that discipline of the mind. No, I'm not going to allow myself to sit and stare out a window and, think about all the things that might happen when I go to that event. I say stop.
Stinking
I say
thinking.
no. Yeah. And so, but that is about being aware as well. So many of us are walking through life a bit semi-unconscious, just in the zone of doing all the things and robot and press, we're just on go. But to actually be a bit more aware of the telltale signs and symptoms in our own body, in our own world, in our decisions, in our behaviours. And I think also having the conversation, and there's been times where I have seen a change in Serge, and I know he might not call it anxiety, but I know he's under it, and I know that he's not. So it's addressing that and going, baby, you okay? And often they'll be, I'm fine, and it's like, well, are you sure? And that he might be okay, but why are we not being bold with our loved ones and asking a simple question? Are you okay? Because I'm seeing there's just something not quite right with you. And giving people permission to be honest.
Yeah, that is a big one. And the whole, we go in 1,000 directions with this, but the whole that subject around self-awareness, we use the excuse of busyness not to have to look in the mirror and go, I need to do some work here. How do you sort of encourage people to start looking inwards?
Well, I mean, I think it either happens two ways. One is you're the type of personality or the person who's just on this road of wanting to be self-development and personal development and growing and being your best version, right? Mm-hmm. Then there's other people that might have a bit of a life crisis that really just life slams them and they are forced to address issues. Or, are forced to make massive lifestyle changes or massive changes for whatever reason. So, I'm always about, what do you need to do to be more aware in your own surroundings? And is that what you want? Because some people are like, Lisa, I don't want that. And that's okay. There's not, there's not a rule, right?
Yeah.
But it's just more about the avoidant behaviour of a lot of people about wanting to address how they feel. Because to feel, we are human beings and we're big part of us is feeling humans. But it's like the emotions and feeling part of us is like, we don't have time for that. We have only got time for logistics. We've only got time for achievements and success. I don't want to feel that, because who wants to feel anxiety? Who wants to feel pain? Who wants to feel disappointment? Who wants to feel that betrayal that happened? No, sirree. I don't want to sit there. I'm just going to get on with it. And the old quote drives me crazy, because I'm like, it is what it is, really, because it sounds so flippant. It's not, and bad things happen to people. Sometimes we make really dumb choices that have great consequences, or sometimes it's just little blimps along the way. But to say to someone, it is what it is, I don't know. I just find that it's one of my little pet hates, to be honest. And maybe some of the listeners are like going, well, I like it, that's fine. But it's just that flippancy around, well, yeah, it might be is what it is, but underneath that, there is a lot of stuff. There's a lot of response to that. There's a lot of reaction to whatever it is. And we're not giving ourselves permission to feel it.
You tell me, but the further you push it down and the more you avoid it, it's going to be like a spring. It's going to come back and bite, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think I say to people all the time, not many people get away with not dealing with the stuff. I say, if we have to do the work, we have to get in the trenches, and we can put it off. And even going back to my own journey, I put it off and put it off and put it off because I was just on the road of, let's do this. This is what the doctor said. I'm going to do that. And I am not going to address how I feel, because I remember sitting in front of a counsellor saying, if I unpack that, I actually don't know that I'm going to get off the ground, and I don't have time for that.
And we just for the listeners, we're talking about
for the infertility. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's that's probably a great example. And if you're happy to dig into that, I'd love to expand on it a bit. So, like most hard-working Aussie couples, there's almost this societal perception that if you're going to be the happy family, you've got to have kids. Mm-hmm. It's almost an unwritten rule in a lot of ways, and I say that because Sonia and I have dealt with that, and I'll perhaps talk a bit more about that with you as we go through. But so that's something that most Aussie couples deal with at some stage of the game. Talk us through, because you mentioned earlier on when you were talking through that you saw that. I sense that you saw that as a failure in yourself at one stage. Can you take us on that journey? Because I think it's a really important one to put some perspective around.
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely, like you were just saying, there is that social, I guess, scenario of, well, if you're not having kids, what's wrong with you, and if you can't, what's wrong with you? And, I work with couples all over the world now on varying, ends of the spectrum. And I say to people all the time that, motherhood is A, not for everyone, and B, even the ones that want it don't always get it. And then there's some that have it and then they decide they don't want it. And then there's some that love it, right? And I think there's, and I think we're so unkind, especially with women to women. We're quite unkind in that arena. However, for me, it was something that, I'd always wanted. And I guess when you're told that it's really unlikely to happen, it's that whole, what do you mean? Like, and it's that, and then, as the years went by and we went through IVF for 8 years and had 10 rounds of IVF, and and it was just that, well, what's wrong with my body? Why my body not carry this baby after baby, and because as humans, we need, if there's a reason, we can sit with that. But when there's just no reason, that's unbearable. It's like, well, there has to be an answer. There has to be no, it's just, it's one of those things, and so I had this, and because my definition of success of failure was very staunched in, if I don't, then I'm a failure. My experience in that field was very, very traumatic. So, and as time and therapy and, my faith and all that kind of stuff just, started to tap in, I realized that, it's not about me being a failure. It's just, life happens and everyone's got different stories, and it wasn't my right to have children, just because I'm a woman, and it didn't make me better or worse or lesser or greater, So it was a real battle for me, John. Like, it was a real battle. So I think
and most of that was pressure that you put on yourself, do you think, Les?
Yes.
Or
Yes, totally. Yeah, totally.
So,
totally. But there was external pressure as well. Of course, people were very unkind, said really bad things, maybe not meaning to, just, things like, well, obviously there's something in your psyche that doesn't want to have children.
Right,
yeah. I could write another book, let me tell you. So many things. Maybe you're not doing enough, and I mean, maybe you need to manifest, which, by the way, that word kills me, or eat more kale, or do this or do. And so everyone had an opinion, right?
Of course.
And I would eat kale and stand on my head if that's what the doctor told me to. But, not everything, and I think it was coming to terms with that, it's not just a right, it's not just that should happen. And so I think, for me, going back to your question, talk about anxiety. I mean, I had 8 years of anxiety,
And the longer that takes, the bigger it gets, because the higher the expectation, the more you put on it, and the less you can have something, the more you want it.
Yeah, and I mean, right up until the last stages, and obviously, we've got beautiful little boy, but, I was in counselling in that final 6 months before I got pregnant, and she was amazing, but I was going through the process of grieving being a mother. Like, that was the final stage that I was, pursuing, because I knew I needed to face that. And so that wasn't, let me tell you, that was not a fun couch experience. But, I think it's that whole concept around, we have to deal with our pain. Because if we don't deal with our pain, and from the outside, and, probably you and Sonia even witnessed it in the years, I presented really well. I was gunning like no one, but behind the scenes, it was, being in the fetal position and Serge, his shirt just being covered in mascara and just, but I think, and the reason why we wrote the book, and the reason why I've been a bit more open about it, even though it's not, it's not natural to speak about your worst years. It's not natural to speak about those dark times, because, again, we live in this world where we want the highlights, but they were not highlight years for me at all. And I think that message of, and I played it well. I was a good Academy Award winner, and I regret that. Right? I regret that, but there was part of me that the shame, I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with it. So I performed. And I think a lot of people in all different areas of their life, the areas that cause us pain or have caused us pain, we run. We don't want to know. I don't think I'm alone in that.
Not at all. Not at all. Right. I mean, when I lost my marriage, Lisa, the shame, I withdrew from the world for 2 years. I became a hermit, because I marriage was that was for life. That wasn't even a question. And when that didn't happen, it's like, well, what's wrong with me? I can't face people anymore. That was part of who I was. That's part of who I was supposed to be. So how can I now look someone in the eye? It's that shame was, mind you, and I guess retrospect's a really easy thing. And you mentioned that people come to self-awareness either through a catastrophe or a challenge, or they're just the sort of people that want to continue. There's no doubt. My search was because of the catastrophe. I'd lost my marriage, which was the biggest thing for me and the biggest shame for me. So I was like, okay, well, how am I going to avoid this happening again?
But here's the thing, John, like there was part of you that, did walk that out, and maybe it took longer than 2 years, but there's so many people that have that experience the same emotions but ignore it. And I think that's the danger. And that's where, that's why when people think counselling's like the bottom of the barrel in a career, I just think you have no idea what it's like to sit with someone who gets and to walk alongside someone just in an environment where people are exploring and processing and dealing with and having like it's magic. Yeah. It's not magic sitting and watching someone in pain. And I mean, I've had some experiences in my counselling room where it's actually been overwhelming for me. Yeah. But pain is part of being human. And if we don't experience pain, then I think we're not actually even switched on. Because pain can happen. I'm not talking catastrophic pain. I'm talking just the pain of, my child didn't get picked for the rugby team. That hurts me because it hurts my kid. Or I got looked over for that promotion. That's painful, Yeah. Or the bank rejected me on blah, 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 blah. There's just pain points all over the place. And it's not about sitting and dwelling in it, but it's just about acknowledging it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us on that journey through IVF for you. At what point did you say, right, I'm going to go and get counselling? And that eight year very traumatic exercise, because it takes a fair bit of guts for someone to say, right, I need to go and get some help with this. When did that happen, and can you talk us through a bit of that?
Yeah, look, I think part of it was we got signed up to one of the local clinics and their counsellor, and let me tell you, to be honest, that was the moment that I decided to go back to uni to get my degree, because we sat in this session and it was so awkward, and Serge was sitting there like just deer in headlights, and I was just awkwardly bantering, like not knowing what was going on, and I was like, it was just the worst. And I still remember coming out just going, well, that went well, and like, what was that? And it was in that moment I was like, you know what, I'm if I can sit in that space with another couple, then I'm going, and that's kind of the journey of me going back to uni and taking that path. But, because I'd always been interested in psychology and things like that, I just recognised that for Serge and I, and it's like anything for any couple, no matter what the topic is or what the challenge or mountain is, Serge could not be who I needed him to be, because he had his own version. And I think sometimes what happens in relationships is we pull on each other, and as men and women, we are so different. It doesn't matter. I don't care what anyone says. We are so different, the way we process, the way we do things. And so I recognize that actually to save my marriage, or to at least, keep it a little bit safe, I needed another space. Yeah. And so, I had one-on-one counselling for many years, and Serge and I had many sessions as a couple when it just got too much, because it just you start turning in on each other. And, Serge had his own, and, in the book, his chapter is probably the chapter we hear the most from, because it's the male version, and often, and again, it's not just infertility, it's any story. Often men just deal with things differently, and women are known to talk, and I'm generalising, obviously. But men, you think about men and men's mental health at the moment, it's diabolical that men suffer just as much as women, but they do not ever ask for help, because it's that social construct of, well, what's wrong with you? Man up.
Yeah, and
Man up, mate.
I think it's also, I'm talking personally here, but we're very solution focused. There's a problem, yes. Right? Let's fix it. Let's just get it and fix it. Yeah. And I know this probably sounds stupid, and my counsellor was probably laughing on the inside the first time I went to see a counsellor. I was like, okay, I'm here. I don't really have a problem. I just want some strategies. I know I've got this issue and I've got that issue. So can you just give me some strategies and an action plan so I can go off and get it done?
Oh my gosh, good. Well, you know what? Maybe we went to the same counsellor, because my first session was, okay, so I know I'm grieving. I'm probably at stage 2. How many sessions do I need to get to stage 5? And she just looked at me like, are you? And I was not even joking. Like, just get me there. And then I was insulted that she was like, well, I can't. And I was like, what's wrong with you? You can't even, like, I was like a bit judgy. I'm like, well, you're useless. But I love, but it's the same thing, but here's the thing. We want to, even female, we want it fixed, because P.S., I do not want to sit in this pain. I don't want to sit in unresolved relationship conflicts. I don't want to sit in this space that makes me feel any of these things. I want out. Get me out quickly.
Yeah.
And, anything good in life doesn't happen quickly.
No, absolutely dead right there. Yeah, we've circled around this a little bit, but I can see why there's an obvious interest in psychology, but it's. Can you expand on your interest in that area, where that was seeded from, and whatnot? Because I find there's not a lot of people who go down that path.
Look, I think probably one of my highest values as a human is relationships and connection, and I think I've just always, and it's probably also conditioning from my own parents, watching them do life and do relationships and invest in people, and I think it was just more that wiring of people. Always been something that has interested me, why people do what they do, where it stems from, how we make changes if we need to, and it's just really delving in, even just the brain. I mean, we just know so little about the brain and the why and the function of it. And I think, when I see, even when I watch the news, and trust me, I very, very rarely watch that because it's too distressing, but I look at scenarios, or I look at the world that we're in, and I think, there's always a reason why people behave good or bad.
Yeah.
There's always a reason why marriages fail. There's always a reason, and I just feel like when we can understand that, and sometimes there's no way of understanding it all, but when we can actually just kind of see people through different lenses, I just think there's a level of grace in that, and there's a different level of generosity.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was always, and I always, even in HR, you're working with people, you're seeing them, go do great things or challenge or whatever. And I think, as human beings, maybe it's just me, but there's no greater gift than just hanging with people and watching them do life.
Yeah. Yeah. The satisfaction you would get from seeing someone who's in dire straits and they're there in front of you because they don't know how to solve this issue themselves, and then over time see them take some positive steps forwards must be very gratifying, Lisa.
Yeah, and it is, and it's not always, unicorns and roses, and there's some, like in any profession, there's some really challenging clients that really test me, and there's some days that I don't enjoy it, like, let's be honest, but overall it's those little nuggets of, wow, just to watch the transformation. And transformation can be in one session or 3 years down the track.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. You haven't mentioned the name of your book, but I think it's worth mentioning because it is something that a lot of people will be tackling. And it seems to be a growing issue, whether it's a dietary or the stressful lifestyle that we all live now. But infertility seems to be something that has and you know more about the facts and figures on this, but it certainly seems to be a growing issue. Can you tell us about the book and where people can get it if they're challenging with that?
Look, so the book is called Silent Tears, and it's basically through the looking glass of IVF. And the truth of this story was I published this a couple of years ago. We have a 6-year-old now, but the book, 80% of it was written before we ever got pregnant. The book was written through some of my really challenging years. And the truth is that book was always going to get published with or without the results. Do you know what I mean? I was very clear about my why. I was very clear about, that I wanted to give people, because I think it's so normal now. Oh, they're doing IVF. You'll be fine. But there's nothing normal about IVF. It's traumatic. It's challenging. It's, marriages, the percentage of marriage breakdown is next level. It challenges your identity. The financial is unbearable.
Yep.
So I wrote it. It was not easy to write. Serge wrote his chapter. I did not even read his chapter until it was about to be published.
Wow.
And it was hard for me to read. But it was absolutely true, and I really valued his take on it. And I wanted a male perspective because, they get kind of left out.
Mm-hmm.
And, it is obviously a story about IVF, but actually in the heart of the story, it's more about when life brings disappointment and when life is not what you thought it was going to be, and how to cope in marriage and grief. And it's really about therapy. It's like a therapeutic tool. And yes, it sits in IVF clinics, and yes, it works. A lot of couples going through it read it, but actually the message underneath it is, just a little chick from Adelaide who was like, this is a story of grief and love, actually, and this is a story of when life throws you curveballs that you had no equipment for. What do?
Yeah, love it. Well, knowing you as well as I do, and your good husband Serge, I know it would be a good read. I know it would be. You'd tell it how it is. So,
there's some funny parts. There's some, like, it's pretty raw, and there's sometimes I read it back and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I told people that. But it's just honest.
I love you. You have me in stitches. Your social media posts, I actually look forward to yours because I'm wetting myself 9 times out of 10 because you just tell exactly how it is, and you say what most of us think but we're too scared to say.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to switch into what I call the ambush round, Lise, which is the sort of 5 quick questions that the listeners constantly pester me about. And first of those is, what is your favourite quote and why?
So probably a bit left of centre, but my favourite is a proverb, actually from the Bible, and it's my favourite, and I'll tell you why. But it's she is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. And I love that, and I often just, meditate on that because dignity for me is that she carries herself well. And that, honestly, I don't always, but that is my great intention, that I carry myself well in who I am, that I'm aligned with what I believe and what I do, my behaviours. Am I a work in progress? Of course. And that without fear of the future of, and that's not about not having anxiety, but it's just about that I'm deliberate in my footsteps, that I can ask for help when I need to, that I might be something and someone to someone else, So it's one of my favourite go-tos.
I love it. I love that one. I've never heard of it.
Proverbs 31, it is.
Yeah. Okay. That is a cracker, Lisa. I'll look that up actually because that's. I've read a lot of Bible verse, but that's certainly not one that has hit the mark, and it really does. It's a great credo, actually. Yeah, love that. Turning to books for a minute, we've mentioned your book, Silent Tears, but what's the top book that you'd recommend people read and why?
And it's an old basic one, but because of what I was talking about, my values being relationships, the 5 love languages is something that I love. It's by Dr. Gary Chapman. Most people have probably heard about it, read it, but I just think, you know what, it's a very, I don't want to say basic as in it's just simple, but it's kind of such a great foundation and framework into relationships. And I'm not just talking marriages, I'm talking with just humans. And I think that if people could really stand in that that methodology, I think the world could look a bit different.
So it just put, I'd 100% agree. I remember Sonia and I read that book together. I can't tell you how many years ago.
Long time ago, probably.
Yeah, it
it's
was.
been around for a long time.
But it puts some real perspective around, okay, well, that's helped me understand who I am, and I understand better who she is, and I understand what needs she has better now, because it's not what mine are. Our default position with everything is, well, if that's what I want, then that's obviously what the other person wants, so I'll just do that. And then why isn't that working? Which was my default position before that, and that really opened my eyes to that. And you're right, it has much broader application, because it doesn't matter who you're dealing with. If you can start to understand who they are and how they think, and what and in what ways you can demonstrate to them in a means that they accept and embrace, then as a communication tool, the world would be a much happier place if everyone had adopted that sort of a framework. So,
I believe so.
Awesome book. That is an awesome book, and I would get right behind you in recommending anyone who hasn't read it. You don't read it just for your relationship, although it is a massive help with that. But in terms of understanding how you interact with others, it's a really good baseline. So, very good suggestion. Now, this one is totally left field, but because everyone in Australia that I come across feels they pay too much tax, what's the top thing that you've legally done to minimise the tax that you've paid?
Well, it's probably a very one-sided relationship, but probably having my accountant. And I do feel sorry for him, because every year I say I'm going to do better and be better and have things more organised, but it's just not my area of expertise. But he's been amazing, and he holds it well. As I said, I'm sure he eye rolls internally. Sometimes maybe I miss it externally, but he he keeps it in check, and it's not my favourite time of year. So that's probably been, and I invested in him from day one, and he was the one in the very first year where he said to me, Lisa, I've got good news and bad news. I'm like, okay, well, clearly give me the bad news first. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you that you made $4 for the year. Like, you broke even with $4. So that's great news. The bad news, you now owe me $330 for doing it. And I'm like, that is horrible. I cried. I'm like, as my dad said, I walked out and I rang my dad, and he was like, Lisa, the good news is in 1 year you did more than break it. You made a profit, girlfriend. I'm like, $4.
Exactly. Well, I reckon in year one of any business, that is an awesome result. Most are in the red by quite a distance. So you did pretty well there, Lisa.
I couldn't even buy coffee, but anyway.
Now, switching back to the old investment topic, and this is not related to investing in shares, property or otherwise. It can be in anything, whatever you invest your time, energy, money, resources in. But what would you say is both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received today?
Probably the best came from my parents, which was travel the world, which I have done and did in my 20s a lot, and so therefore didn't come into a marriage with any investment portfolio or properties.
Sure.
And I'm so grateful for that, and I will always tell people travel is one of the greatest investments ever.
Yeah.
We have done a lot of property in our time, building and selling, which has been great.
Yeah.
The worst bit of investment, I think it's just advice. Advice. I don't know if it's been like personally one-on-one advice. I think it's just the message of having to do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Right? So that whole, what might be right for Jim and Sarah is not right for me and Serge.
Yeah.
But in the world where it's like it's cookie cutter, this is what makes you wealthy or this is what is important.
Yeah.
I think it's just I struggle with that. I just want to run our own race. Have we made mistakes? Oh my gosh, we've overcapitalized. We've made rash decisions based on emotions. All of it. We've done it all. You name it.
We all do.
But I don't want that advice of you must do this to be successful or wealthy. I want it to be tailor-made to my personality, to my values, to my beliefs, to what I want. Yeah. So probably that.
Yeah, and you've hit on And spot on with that. In our business, when someone comes to us, there is no one size fits all, because it's all about their goals, their aspirations, their sleep at night factor. Everyone's different in that regard, what they feel comfortable with and what they don't. And if you don't acknowledge those things, whatever you get yourself involved in isn't going to be a success anyway. So, that's really good. Okay, well, last question I'd always like to close on, Lisa. If you spoke to someone who's just leaving school, let's say it's your beautiful son, Jack, and he's about to leave school, what would you advise him to invest his time, energy, money and skills in to create his version of freedom?
Education.
Yeah.
Travel. Amazing, strong, secure, healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And I think the rest would be history.
Yeah, spot on. Love that. That is some awesome thoughts, Lisa. Always love having a chat to you. It's been well overdue for you and I having a chat so that other people can share in your brilliance. Love to get you back at a later stage. I'm sort of in the longevity of Get Invested. Time and time again now, it's become crystal clear to me that the starting point and the finishing point is getting much more aware of self and self-awareness, because if we don't and we ignore that, then it'll sabotage us at some point in time. And it's a growing area in a world where there seems to be this widening gap between what we're expected to do and what's really right for us. And you're really at the cutting edge in that regard, in helping people to navigate that quite perilous exercise these days. So really appreciate you spending some time with us today, Lisa.
Well, it's been a privilege. Thank you for having me on here.
Awesome. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Lisa.
All right, take care. Bye.
Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/Get Invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.